Well, good morning, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And with us this morning, by special arrangement, Mark Kulacz of Housatonic ITS, Housatonic Live on YouTube, and one of the great researchers that I've been privileged to work with over the past few years. Mark's been looking into all kinds of different things. Most recently, the genome and the idea of genetics and working with genetics to quote unquote improve humanity. That's an idea that has started way back in with the Fabians and even going back into history to see. People have always wanted to do that. I think the Egyptian pharaohs were practicing incest just to not to dilute their own bloodlines, and that kind of insanity persists along with the whole idea of eugenics, which is, as we've studied fairly thoroughly here on the show, a big bunch of hogwash that was financed by the elites to try to justify their real desires. Well, Mark, it's been a little while, but you joined me for as part of our celebration of my dad's life on Saturday night. I'm grateful for you and your kind thoughts that night. But let's get back into your research, because you are very active and I can't keep up with you. Where would you like to start?
Boy, well, first of all, it was a very beautiful event. It was great that so many people showed up. Obviously, yeah, you have a lot of fans, John. A lot of people care for you and are out to help you. So congratulations and happy birthday again to McDuff. And thanks for having me back on the show. Hope you're doing well today.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I see some really great people in the chat room. I'd say hello to everybody. Timothy Judd, particular thanks for his great violin playing at the ceremony, and then afterward in the after party was particularly enjoyable. So thank you, Timothy, and glad you're here this morning. Okay.
So I tend to, perhaps I approach things with a slightly different angle than a lot of other people. I think precisely because I don't have a long history in researching a lot of these topics. Just as of 5 or so years ago, I was more or less still in my regular everyday job, believing most of what I saw in the news was what they said it was. I always knew it was a little bent, but not quite as much as I've discovered since then. So in the current pandemic, and I guess we can say the current one, because even though it's sort of over, it's still ongoing. They're still encouraging people to get their new medicine. We've been trying to understand what is really behind this thing. And there's a lot of, you can either believe the official mainstream narrative, which is, the official mainstream narrative is, nature is dangerous. People are pushing into nature. Diseases are emerging. This threatens all of humanity, and we need to trust the scientists. And it's really that simple. Or is it science gone mad? Is it irresponsible? Was it a geopolitical event involving nations using technology, using potentially biological weapons? And how to best respond to this for myself, my family, etc. So coming at it from that, and so for people who don't necessarily adopt the main narrative, some will say they point to a potential depopulation conspiracy. Some will say, oh, it's about money. Big pharma companies just want to sell more medicine, etc. But those don't really work for me. If you're already married into and tied into the banks, you can already print all the money you want. So why go through all this hassle for an extra few billion or $1 trillion, whatever? It doesn't seem worth it. And as far as depopulation goes, well, why would someone want to necessarily go down that route? It's so easy. I think if they really wanted to get rid of people, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. What came out, as far as revisiting the history, a lot of the uh, the history of medicine and cancer research, and it even ties into the Manhattan Project, is there has been a long, rather dark history involving non-consensual testing of new medicines on people in other countries, but also within the United States, oftentimes not actually taking advantage of disabled, elderly, prison populations, etc. And this desire to get more and more people to test more and more things on. In addition to that, I think we've had a fundamental change over the last 50 or so years in the way science is being implemented with respect. It used to be more, here's a hypothesis, and then you make some tests to test your hypothesis, right? You try to prove your hypothesis wrong, and then you refine it, and then you come up with a theory. The newer science is more, they call it experimentalism, which is where you just do things and collect lots and lots and lots of data. The more data, the better. And you look for patterns. It's almost like you don't know what the hypothesis is. You're just trying to collect data. That combined with potentially needing more and more people to test on, I think better explains the current situation, which is it's not quite clear how we work. There has been a lot of the Human Genome Project was started in the 1980s. The ability to actually map out all the human DNA. And they believed once they had the DNA mapped out, they would be able to identify diseases and get rid of infectious diseases and so on, maybe even live a little bit longer. At least that's what we've been told. But it hasn't worked out like that at all. It's not, human DNA hasn't been exactly what they expected it to be. They actually expected to look at human DNA and like find things in there like, oh, this gene causes cancer, which, John, is a little bit like, okay, if a Boeing airplane crashes, going through the code and looking for the piece of code that says, make airplane blow up. It doesn't work like that. You know, there's so much, you have to factor in all of these other environmental factors, environmental, family, connections with others. There's so many, diet, of course, all these other things go into that. And in order for the scientists to get to that next level, they need to run a whole lot more tests on people. And I think one of those big tests is a new type of medicine, which is being encouraged as part of the current pandemic. I'm not necessarily the best person to describe the exact mechanics of this medicine because I'm not a virologist, but I can understand it enough, and I know enough people to be able to dig in to understand and appreciate the revolutionary nature of it. And truth be told, we don't actually know, at least I don't believe we know, enough to say that it's absolutely a dangerous thing or it's going to be a great thing. I just think that it's not quite clear. But millions of people have been encouraged to join the test process, especially within the United States, where we have over 60% of the population right now having absorbed this new medicine. And who really knows what's going to happen? I mean, clearly most people are still going to work, so it's not like it hasn't been catastrophic, but we don't know the 10, 15, 20 year where this is going to go. At least I don't believe we do. So the research has shown, to try to view this thing in a different light. You can see why there's so much pressure right now to defend the fact that this virus came from nature, as opposed to coming from man-made purposes, because I think that really changes. It's not just the blame, but changes how much we're going to fear these things going forward. Because if it did come out of if it was a human augmented or human created thing, that means that at best, if it was accidental, someone didn't wash their hands, and that killed a number of people equal to Jews killed in the Holocaust. And I think if we have labs which are doing things which are really that dangerous, and all injuries that happen as a consequence of the medicine after the fact are also due to that simple, maybe someone didn't wash their hands in a lab somewhere. That's really scary. And knowing that this stuff is still ongoing every day, it's a bit, that's a bit of a long, winding answer, if you will, to what we're studying. But we're studying the history of all of the geopolitical and military and medical interests that led to all of this money, all of this pressure to research the human genome, genetics. It ties into the history of the internet. It ties into the history of computing. It goes back to the Manhattan Project. As a matter of fact, they call it the creation of this new medicine, the new Manhattan Project. They actually refer to it as that. So it's a lot of revisitation of history to try to better understand more deeply what's going on right now and where it's going, and hopefully merge that with the work of other people who really understand the science down to a very molecular level. It's not about assigning blame. It's about where are we going? We want to support all of this scientific research as much as possible. I think that there is potentially a lot of amazing stuff that could come out of it, but I don't believe doing these things in such a non-transparent way and non-consensual way potentially is the right moral, ethical way to go about things. I know that humanity is capable of much more than that. So anyways, the long answer, maybe it's not even an answer at all. Maybe I missed the point, but that's what we're working on now.
It seems that you've really taken a step back from the idea of something nefarious going on behind the scenes, which is pretty much the theme of my work. So I'm interested to see how for instance, as you were talking, let's take the example of something like SARS. Okay, how do you see that in this scientific hypothesis scenario that you've given us?
One of the three things that led me to revisit common narratives, especially about medical stuff, is Lyme disease. And Lyme disease, I'm highly confident, is connected to an accident regarding Plum Island Animal Infectious Disease Facility, which is about 120 miles or so from New York City. And the gain-of-function bacteria, which were injected into ticks, which probably escaped. We can't even find them on our dog. So sometimes, imagine how easy it must be for them to escape a large research facility. So I've always been, I approach this with a little bit of doubt about when I hear about new diseases breaking out, just happening randomly in nature. I'm already a little bit skeptical. That skepticism continues with the official HIV narrative. That skepticism builds when you look at what was considered to be West Nile in New York City in 1999. And that skepticism builds further now with this push to say that this current SARS-CoV-2 thing it was an accident. It just came out of a cave or a frozen fish sticks, or who the heck knows. More, and it seems like all these major problems always seem to go back to laboratory work. Now, whether they were accidental releases or intentional, I don't know. I think that's going further than what we know. But the research of what these things are usually has connections to other pathogen augmentation work, which was ongoing somewhere. And they always seem to, again, reinforce predicted narratives. All the way back, late 1980s, 1990s, some of the top doctors who were involved in this type of work were saying, we're going to have emerging diseases. They're coming. They're going to come out of caves. They're going to come out of Asia. They're going to affect this many people. And time again, they seem to be right, shockingly. I'm actually having a hard time finding something, John, which does not appear to be somehow connected to human manipulation. I'm sure it happens. I mean, rabies, for example. There's many rabies impacts many people, like in the nation of India. But that there's no necessarily rabies epidemic. They're each constant, new exposure to rabid dogs, dog bites, etc., bypassing our protective first layer immune system by getting directly into our bloodstream. Those things kind of make sense, but that does not match the narrative of, somewhere a virus is going to mutate from a bat and it's going to kill millions and millions of people. And the only way we can protect ourselves is to have everyone live in assigned areas, to reduce our movement, and to take your injections. That's it. There's no other way to avoid it. Which, when you think about it, is okay. At one point, all of this civilization didn't even exist. There were only just a few people. Everything that you see, every mall, every building, every school was built by plowing into nature. Why weren't all of those people dying of viruses all the time? Why is it just now this new zoonotic thing appears to be the big problem? And it's, anyways, I'm doubtful of the official SARS narrative, extremely doubtful. I don't have as much evidence on that particular breakout specifically, but with so many other things in doubt, I initially look at something like that. Like I become biased. I prejudge it, I guess. Like, okay, is this going to be that one time that it was really zoonotic? I don't know. I'm not so sure.
It seems to me that you've got an awful lot of circumstantial evidence that could lead you to make a conclusion, but you as a scientist are resisting making that conclusion because you're not through with your hypotheses and your studies. Is that fair to say?
Well, I'm an engineer by trade. I have a degree in computer engineering. Not necessarily virology or biology. And as an engineer, I work professionally as an analyst, so I know what I do know, and I know how to keep an open mind on the things that I don't know. It's not about proving myself right. Matter of fact, my goal is always to prove myself wrong, because if I'm not proving myself wrong, I'm not evolving at all. I'm just stuck with some, day by day getting older and older hypothesis. Why would I want to defend that? I want to prove myself wrong and get to that next point. Now SARS-CoV-2 is a little bit different. There is abundant information which I have looked at and I've had other people review. There's so many smoking guns at the molecular level that it was a lab augmented thing. This type of this particular virus could not have evolved so rapidly in such a very specific way, and it includes HIV type protein structures within it, which we have on video 30 years ago, predictions that, something like this may happen. It may come out of Asia. Yes, Dr. Fauci gave an ominous warning to Trump, was it 2017, in January or February, that Trump is definitely going to face a surprise pandemic. But there's many other scientists or elected officials who predicted something similar with just far too great of a level of specificity for it to just be coincidence. But with that said, again, looking at other pandemics, other outbreaks, I tend to be extremely skeptical because it's always the same narrative. Something just happened out of nature. Viruses leap. Viruses just don't leap like that. They don't. Not to mention, viruses don't benefit themselves by killing a host organism. A virus that kills its host organism does not spread. End of story. So they're if you have any appreciation for at least the basic Darwinian theories, which are not in their fullest extent true, but that things will adapt in order to survive. Viruses do not want to kill anything. They do not benefit from killing anything. As a matter of fact, it's almost a kamikaze suicide if a virus kills its host organism. Bacteria, on the other hand, will eat anything that they can eat, and then that dead person touches someone else, the virus, the bacteria would just continue to spread. It's a completely different type of evolution. So, anyways, we're fed a lot of BS, John. How's that? We're fed a lot of BS in this world.
Well, we are, and I'm quite serious in trying to get it to pick up my shovel and get it out of the way and find what's really there, and it troubles me a lot. It really does. This mystery of well, maybe it was natural, maybe it was a lab leak, but then there's all of those in the back that are saying, these guys, they're just doing what Rockefeller says. And to be honest, I think I put myself with those folks right now in view of looking at things like Event 201. Looking at things like Project Lockdown of 2010, which was sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation, and the specific plans of the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab, and that incredibly ornate and wheels within wheels chart that you could open up and see all of the specific plans that they had in mind, just in case such an epidemic did happen to erupt. And they pulled it off the shelf and made a book called COVID-19 and the Great Reset, tying those things together. How can we look at all of this circumstantial evidence and not be persuaded that there's some evil hand behind this that doesn't care about the people that are the guinea pigs that they've created? It doesn't care if a disease-borne tick escapes to a populated area. That doesn't care about the people of Africa or other places where these diseases, quote unquote, erupt. Come on, there is a dark hand behind this. That's my strong opinion.
Well, I think generally speaking, that's true. To knowingly subject people to this type of experimentation, there are costs. There are people who have been injured. There are. It does look like there have been some fatalities as a consequence, not just of the outbreak itself, which is obvious, but of the remedy. Some people have tried this remedy and have died. Now, is it how big is that number? I don't know. I don't think it's spectacularly big, but it is real. And to subject people to this, you need to be a little demented, I think. Now, that said, are there other things going on behind the scenes? Is there a competition potentially between nations or groups for control and mastery of this science? Probably, and there may be some individuals involved who understand that there are strategic trade-offs involved in this research. When I was digging in on the history of Microsoft, I ran into this Security Council. It's called the Future Security Working Group, which was developed under President Reagan. And the person who ran this group his name was Andrew Marshall. You probably have heard about. He ran the Office of Net Assessment for over 50 years. And he was assigned that role by Nixon. He finally stepped down in 2015. And then he died, I think, 2 years later at the age of, he was well in his late 90s. And he's considered to be a legend. But Andrew Marshall led this group. And also on this group were multiple people who are tied to the New American Century, PNAC, Project New American Century, 9/11, as well as Zbigniew Brzezinski, as well as Albert Wohlstetter, who, along with his life, basically wrote the U.S. nuclear doctrine. And also key board members are Henry Kissinger, as I already said, Brzezinski, and a Dr. Joshua Lederberg, as well as also a couple of people who actually, I believe, introduced a young Bill Gates to the computing industry. But that all said, but one of the top roles was this Joshua Lederberg in 1987, 88. And I started digging into his history, and he was an advisor to almost as many presidents as Henry Kissinger, and he was side by side with Kissinger silently since the 1960s. He's sort of a soft-spoken guy. Well, who the heck is he? Well, he won the Nobel in the late 1940s, early 1950s for the research sounds a little bit boring. It was about the ability of bacteria that there are actually male and female bacteria, but what he really dug into was how viruses or bacterial phages, because what impact bacteria, can actually pass on and modify the DNA of bacteria, something which is called in the genetics world reverse transcriptase. And if you think of that on a bigger level, this means that viruses are not necessarily just like bacteria, which go around trying to eat and kill things. There's the relationship of cells to viruses and so on, and the ability to pass on genetic information is so much more complicated than than most people are really aware of. And with that knowledge, with that Nobel, he worked with Kissinger for years. He was a big part of, I think, helping Kissinger understand and appreciate the importance of cancer research. What is cancer? Cancer is genetic mutations at the cell level, of making sure that the U.S. still maintained its progress in research into biological weapons, which oftentimes is, studying cancers, which you've been researching regarding your father. Weaponizing them or using viruses you can use viruses to cause cancer. You can potentially use viruses to cure cancer, because viruses contain genetic information and can be used to both fix and cause genetic, or I should say, can augment genetic information within cells. So, and this research was ongoing within the 1940s, 1950s. And I think what Henry Kissinger realized, talking to Lederberg, talking to some other scientists, John, and again, this is a bigger hypothesis that I'm working on, was that traditional strategic warfare, as we understood it, missiles, tanks, bombs, battleships, was becoming more and more was going to become a thing of the past. It was going to come down to computer algorithms. And the biggest threat of the future, the biggest security threat of the future, while certainly not, this isn't necessarily saying, to give up your old military, but was going to be mastery of the human genome and mastery of this whole world of genetics, of the ability to potentially live longer, make your troops more confident, give them that God gene, maybe even, tweak the demographics of the world in your favor. That ability, that technology, really, when you think about it, dwarfs all of the traditional warfare technology or methods. And I think Henry Kissinger understood that. He was sold on it. Hence, the big move to take the National Cancer Institute, move it so close to the military, and then to continue to encourage dollars going to medical biological research, which just has continued to escalate throughout the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And again, it ties into so many other things. The creation of the internet itself actually goes back to the need to scale out computing to multiple colleges to run protein folding calculations, and other work related to genetic research. Just look at the old internet maps, look at the colleges on there, and it's a 1-to-1 correlation with that. It's just a huge revisitation of history. And it also, I think, explains a lot of where I think Henry Kissinger's mind was all the way back then, understanding the importance of it. And this Joshua Lederberg, and you can just find pictures of him with everyone, Rockefellers and Thatcher and all the world leaders, and at the biological meetings involving the Clinton White House in 1997, 1998, where they would have a whole room full of people, all the top scientists and people in this particular field in the White House. You could look at the Oval Table and you see Clinton on one side, and directly on the other side is Lederberg. He's not necessarily an outspoken person. There's not a lot of video of him, but he was at that top level. He was like almost a peer of Henry Kissinger, if you will. And I think he passed about 10 or 11 years ago. And for all intents and purposes, I think Dr. Fauci more or less has filled that role since his passing. Yeah, passed in 2008, exactly. Fauci worked pretty extensively with Lederberg. Now, whether or not it's a white hat, black hat thing, here's the thing. This technology is possible, John. It's a reality. So it's going to happen whether or not nations endorse it. So here's the thing. Who are the people involved in this research, in this technology, who really have bad intentions? And who are the people who look like they have bad intentions, but know that this is going to happen whether they're on board or not? So maybe by them being involved, they can at least have a little bit of influence on it to keep it under control. I believe in my heart that there's actually a lot of good intended scientists who are in that position, who know that, if they step out, it's going to happen anyways. And who do you really want to control it? So it makes it very difficult to assess where each individual is on this. I don't know where Lederberg's position was. I'm not, and I think when we step outside of trying to understand the order that things happened, start to become judgmental of characters, it becomes harder to be more analytical about it. Instead, we start to become defensive of who we believe are the good white hats and gray hats, etc. But that said, it is important to understand that not everyone involved in this has bad intentions, but I believe it's most likely a few people who aren't necessarily in the right place.
Well, it's of course. I mean, I don't. None of my work is directed at people who have thrown their shoulder to the wheel to try to do the best they can with a difficult situation. My work is directed at uncovering who are those people behind the scenes, the ones that George Carlin calls the big club that we're not in. Mm-hmm. And to me, this is the closest I can come to it right now is the banking system and the people that own the banks. And to me, the idea of this really cutthroat financial system mm-hmm. will lead us to cut our corners in morality into testing humans. And this entire regime that you've been painting here today about, well, these are all hypotheses that need to be tested because the scientists don't know all this stuff yet. That is accepting the idea that some people are going to get sick and some people are going to die and some people's families are going to be destroyed and some people's towns and lives and civilizations are going to be destroyed in order to do what? To create the master race?
create the master race, maybe, to beat disease, to live longer. There was a Lederberg, I think it was in the early 2000s. Who's the CEO of Google? I forget the guy's name. Started with an S. Schmidt or
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. He spent a whole month with Lederberg regarding Lederberg's research and applications to life extension. Because you could, selective breeding, which is what we always think of as, which is when people talk about eugenics, they think about selective breeding, or telling other people that they're not to have kids based upon whatever the preference is, I guess.
Blindness, for instance.
Yeah. But that doesn't do anything to help people who are currently alive. So how do you tweak the genetic code of people who are alive? Well, you need different methods of that. And that's what they were studying. That is what is possible. That is what some types of viruses can do. That actually is what HIV does. HIV is a virus that causes cancer. And how does it cause cancer? Because it causes genetic mutations within cells, which is the definition of cancer. It can pass on DNA to the cells which it affects. Now, it doesn't have to be lethal, because every person in the world, even a brand new baby, always has cancer in some level. Mutations happen all the time. Your body, a healthy body, always seeks it out and fights it and undoes the work. It's just expected that things happen, right? Wear and tear happens, mutations happen, but the body is always, usually a healthy body is able to identify it and fix it. But if it's too much, if it overwhelms the body, and if the body already is unhealthy for environmental reasons or whatever, eventually it's just not able to fight that cancer. But this has been an interest of many people. There is almost an infinite number of quantity of money in it. As a matter of fact,
read that.
This goes back to the Manhattan Project, John. One of the biggest budget items during the Manhattan Project, John, was trying to understand the impact of radiation on people. What does radiation do? Causes cancer. What is cancer? Genetic mutations. In a way, there were thousands of people exposed to various types, various levels of radiation, many of them without their knowledge or consent. In the 1940s, in the United States, there was, I think there might have been some down in, I don't know what other countries were part of this, but what they were really doing at that time, whether they knew it or not, where they were studying how to cause genetic mutations, either for good or for bad. It goes back to then, the interest in it. So you actually have connections of the Manhattan Project, the real Manhattan Project, and that money and scientists involved in that with other genetic research. As a matter of fact, there are actually more than a few scientists who started off studying weapons of mass destruction, who curiously and rapidly figured out, okay, here's how you make the biggest bomb. And then a few weeks later, we're doing cancer research. Which again feeds into another hypothesis I have, but that said, I don't need to go there just yet. But it does highlight that these are not necessarily disconnected issues.
When you said for good or for ill, doing research on people that have not given informed consent is by definition for ill. There is no possible way that it can be seen as good, especially under the Nuremberg Code, which specifically forbids that. So I can't get on board with the idea that these scientists that are doing this are doing it, quote, for the good of the human race, or the good of the people that have disease that we want to conquer. So we're gonna inject somebody with an experimental, quote unquote, medicine not knowing what's going to happen. And if some people die, well, that's just what happens in science. We have experiments. Some people die, then we know, then people will die if you do this. Well, that's not informed consent.
Oh, it's not.
So I don't
No.
see how anybody could participate in that, whether at any level of participation, whether they are at the top of the ladder or the bottom. They know that it's wrong to experiment on human beings without their informed consent, and especially children.
Oh, it's wrong. So just may be clear, I'm not supporting it at all. What I am trying to give I'm trying to, how I say, allow for the possibility that there may be individuals who are involved in this research, maybe just everyday worker bees, or maybe even at higher levels of administration, who know that if they say this is a terrible thing, they blow the whistle, whatever, they're out, and that's it. Maybe by keeping their mouth shut, maybe even by going to the grave with their own family, thinking of them as doing something horrible, they at least from within can touch the scales a little bit, maybe slow it down, maybe slightly steer it. It's going to happen. Right now, there's just too much money. There's too much intrigue. There's too much potential for this thing that's snowballing right now to stop. I don't think anyone can stop it. What would happen? I'm actually starting to not even think about the old, this nation versus that nation way of geopolitics. But let's just say there's another bad nation that's on the cusp of figuring all this out. Should we say, no, this is a bad thing to do, and then that other country figures it out first? I don't know. I'm just allowing for these possibilities and trying to be realistic about the where things are going. And I don't think I'm not of the belief that that God is opposed to us researching this stuff. There's no trick in the book that God didn't create for us to find one way or the other. But this is not the right way to do it, without consent, unethically, deciding for others. It's a very complex subject, but when you just take a few steps back and you just see how it connects to everything, even 9/11, I think had a huge aspect of biological warfare associated with it.
Tell me more about that. I heard something like that a week or two ago, but I hadn't nothing behind it. What's behind that idea?
Are you familiar with the what's called the anthrax attacks, or the anthrax letters from October of 2001?
Yeah, it was right after 9/11.
Yep. Okay. Very good. There was a lot of congressional activity regarding concerns of a terrorist attack throughout 2000 and early 2001, even all the way up to early September of 2001. Except it was almost always in the context of a biological attack. Smallpox, anthrax. Matter of fact, that Dr. Joshua Lederberg was having letters read to Joe Biden, who was the lead of the Senate Security something or other, September 5th, 2001, regarding concerns of biological warfare attack on the United States. The Dark Winter training exercises that were written in 1998, 99, 2000 was all about biological weapons attack. There was this West Nile event in New York City in 1999, which it happens to involve many of the same people, involving related to Dark Winter and so on, even some connections to Anthony Fauci, different scientists. And for people who are conspiratorial about potentially something being planned ahead of time for 2001, there was a drill in New York City planned on the day of or the day before in Manhattan for a potential biological weapons attack. So I've been thinking about it, John, and I'm saying, all right, so let's just say that someone had some advanced knowledge, something was going to happen. There was going to be a terrorist attack. Why in the heck would they call in the biological weapons team to address smallpox if there's going to be an explosion? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't line up. It almost, I know I sound so crazy saying this. It almost seems as though the airplane attacks, the airplane explosions, potentially were a way to preempt another type of terrorist attack using biological weapons. I've just throwing that possibility out there. There's a lot of things about 9/11 that doesn't make any sense. But if instead of viewing it as just a few corrupt people in the U.S. government, new world order taking us over, and instead viewing it as different factions, potentially within our military industrial complex, traditional versus biological, it starts to make a lot of sense. You can actually sort of see sides emerging in 2001. What happened after 2001? Department of Homeland Security came out of nowhere. Well, what do? Well, the traditional Department of Defense protects us against military invasions, right? And what's Department of Homeland Security do? Oh, we're going to protect you against ransomware attacks, computer attacks, germs. We're going to protect you against energy shortages. We're going to protect you against forest fires and food shortages and every other little itty bitty thing that can happen in the world, which can make you uncomfortable. and they just became huge in size. You could actually see, traditional military versus Homeland Security and how opposed these two things would be. And that happened precisely because of 2001, or more specifically, the biological attacks, which still happened after 2001. These desperate-looking anthrax letters, which we can trace back to individuals involved. All the way till today, we can see connections to the current pandemic and that anthrax attack. So again, it's more hypothesis, it's more conjecture. But we are revisiting what might have happened in the past based upon things which just don't line up in the present, and now just rediscovering those in the past. And specifically, why was every single premonition, every warning that 9/11 was going to happen about biological attacks? And then it happened. And then a few buildings were mysteriously blown up, like Building 7. And they roped off the whole area. Biological weapon response teams were called in, and then they brushed all of the debris onto a boat and carried it off to China. What the hell was that all about? Was there going to be an attack? Was there some smallpox reserve? I don't know, in Building 7? I don't know. But it certainly makes a whole lot more sense than, oh, there was gold in the basement and they blew up the building to get the gold. Like, well, they could have carried out the gold in unmarked boxes. They didn't need to blow up the freaking building to get the gold. I don't know, John. These are big things, but it just highlights the hyper focus on germs and getting people afraid of pandemics, afraid of biological weapons. And most specifically, it's always the response. And the response is always, you need medication. You need a jab. From nature, you need a jab. Biological weapons, you need a jab. You need a jab. You need boosters. You need more and more and more jabs. So the hyper focus on jabs and tracking. You can't get a jab for COVID-19 without providing your information. Well, if COVID-19 is so dangerous, why aren't the trucks driving down the street saying, take an injection, please, and save your life? Why is it, we need your name, we need a DNA sample, we need your social security number, and we need to track it with a specific batch number. Why do you need that information to save someone's life? It's like saying, if someone falls off a boat, I'll throw you a life preserver, but I need your credit information and your social security number first. No, you just save them. It just appears as though so much of the focus on saving people from COVID-19 is on making sure you have all of their information in the global database. At least to me, John, that's the way it looks.
There's so much there, Mark.
I know.
This is difficult material, and we can only take a little bit of it at a time. But I think that last bit about 9/11 resonates so strongly with me. And if you recall, when we were talking about my dad in the first couple of years, we came up with the idea of this McDuff moment, in which my dad was at one time faced with the option of being part of the Hellawell plan, the idea of, hey, we're going to get all this opium and make it into heroin and import it. And we're only going to give it to the minority kids. We're not going to give it to the white kids or the good kids in the good schools. We're going to make so much money. And this is going to allow us to run covert operations, which is what we love to do because we're in the covert operations business. And it's fun and games, and we love to do it. And so if you want a country to fall, well, you just call us up, and we've got a method to do it. So these guys were trying to get my dad involved in it, and he had his McDuff moment and said, no, I don't want to do it. I will not do that. I speculate as to why he died so very few years later. And that's the subject of the book that I've just finished writing. And I'm be delighted to send you a copy, Mark. I look forward to
I love it.
To hearing from you after you have a chance to look at it. But there you go. The traditional military, which was where I associate my dad with, versus the CIA in his era. Yeah. And now you're looking at the traditional military versus who is the opponent now? The Five Eyes, the whole. Can you put a label on the opponent of the traditional military that you just spoke of? The ones that are running these biological weapons schemes.
I'm still trying to characterize it, but if there's any two groups that just seem to be somewhat opposed, it's traditional military, which has plenty of corruption. Let's just be clear. This is not, a bunch of holy rolling saints.
No, I
military
stipulate to that. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Funny. But then there is it's created in 2001, Department of Homeland Security. And it's almost like everything else that you need to worry about. Everything, food, germs.
It's like an insurance company or a mafia that says, as long as you pay your 10%, you're good.
And you could see that there were battles. Like the one thing that they fought over was Department of the USDA. Well, Homeland Security says, well, we need the Department of Agriculture. We need to protect food. And then, but there were pressures to keeping the United States Department of Agriculture separate because a huge budget item regarding the United States Department of Agriculture is making sure the crops are healthy, making sure that the cows are healthy, and that includes protecting them from disease. So there is a big buried item of biodefense research in the United States Department of Agriculture, which is not clear to most people, and it's a ton of money. Plum Island was always funded out of the USDA. It didn't come out of the military. So you can actually start to see these battles within the government when you start looking at it that way. Tell you what, here's something that you can do, John, and I showed this in the video. Cue up. You can do it after the show. The video of Donald Rumsfeld, who is a pharma guy. Donald Rumsfeld is a pharmaceutical guy. I stress that. Who was heavily aligned with Cheney, who is also has a lot more pharmaceutical interest than you would think. From the evening of September 11th, 2001, and you will see Rumsfeld presenting at the Pentagon. He's the defense secretary at the time, trembling and sweating. Of course, it's a terrible day. But then you see two military generals behind Rumsfeld confidently tell America, you're all set. We got your back. It's like I never really picked up on that. You could almost see And they're all standing so close together. At first, you think, oh, they're all working together. It's just the military. It's like, no, 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 no. There's things going on there. There was things happening that day that no one picked up on, myself included. Myself included. And
well, that's worth another look. I'm
take a look. 10-15-minute video. You watch it and just look at the body language. Look at Rumsfeld looking at his fingernails. Like it's something happened that day. And look, a lot of people died. I'm not saying something good happened. What I am saying is you could see a conflict under the cover, which is, I don't think, ever really been properly or fully understood. And we probably never will understand it. But there you go. That's the video.
Go ahead and give some audio.
Yeah. And anyways.
Give me a second.
Yeah. Well, I hate to give Donald Rumsfeld the last word on our show today, but we're almost to noon. Go ahead.
You consider what happened today, both in New York and here,
turn
an
the
act of war?
speed up.
There is no question but that the attack against the United States of America today was a vicious, well-coordinated, a massive attack against the United States of America. What words the lawyers will use to characterize it is for them.
Does that mean that the U.S. is at war then?
Mr. Secretary, you said that the Pentagon would be open for business tomorrow. What kind of assurances can you give the people who work here at the building that the building will be safe?
A terrorist can attack at any time, at any place, using any technique. It is physically impossible to defend at every time, in every place, against every technique. It is not possible to give guarantees. The people who work in this building do so voluntarily. They're brave people, and they do their jobs well.
Mr. Secretary, can you give a sense of what happened? What did you see when you left your office, ran down to the site, and apparently helped people on stretchers and returned to the command center?
I felt the shock of the airplane hitting the building. Went through the building and then out into the area, and they were bringing bodies out that had been injured, most of which were alive and moving. But
yeah, after the attack, John, he actually was strolling around on the lawn and found an airplane part that identified that it was an airplane that flew into the building.
And into ambulances and into airlifts.
That's the end of the video.
All right. So
watch the whole thing. He gets more and more anxious as it goes on, and the body language of the generals, who I guess again, it was a remarkable day. I'm not sure that there's a right way to act, but as far as a defense secretary goes, just watch the full 10 or 15 minutes, and it does not seem like Rumsfeld is in control at that moment, even though he is United States Defense Secretary. He should be in control at that moment.
okay. Well, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for being with us today here at McDuff Lives, and we will carry on. Mark, thanks for getting back with us. It's been too long, and we'll have you back again soon. And keep up the good work, my friend.
1 second. Can we give?
Oh, hang on.
Can we give Mark's Patreon and YouTube channel a plug?
Mark's Patreon and YouTube channel a plug. Mark at Housatonic Live on YouTube. And what is your Patreon?
It's just Housatonic. I just got my 100th Patreon today. It's good. We're doing great. We're almost at the point where we can cover the expenses, which is great. My wife will be very happy about that.
All right. Boy, I know that feeling.
But yeah, well, it is what it is. We do it, John, because we can't not do it, right? Let's put it that way.
Okay, Housatonic Live and Mark Kulacz, thank you so much. Everybody have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon.